excuses don't get me started. This is a conversation about advertising. And here is your host, freelance creative director and creative circus department head, Dan Balser.
Yes, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I just want to start off by thanking TJ Beaker, recent grad of the Creative Circus, for telling me that the intro to the show is too loud. And it's hard to manage the levels, but the last thing I want to happen is for that music at the beginning to blast your eardrums. If the music that you're hearing is too loud, send me an email, let me know, and I'll adjust it. TJ, if it's not good yet, let me know. It's danspodcast@mac.com is my email, and you can let me know right now if that was too loud, or if I'm breaking up, or if anything weird is happening with production. I'm still trying to figure this thing out. I've been doing the podcast for a little while, and I'm still working out the kinks on the production of the thing. I think that's a little better. All right, so Maxx Delaney's back visiting school from down in Texas, and he's dressed like a New Yorker, and he works in Austin, Texas. He's wearing a black t-shirt, black pants, black, really cool beard. I'm going to take a picture of that. Make sure you remind me to take a picture at the end.
I will.
Black hair and some, how do you describe those glasses? What's the color of the glasses? Horn rim.
I think that they're brown.
Brownish, kind of maroon beige. Yeah.
Another shade of reddish brown.
Reddish and
with an eyelash on the lens.
There's some reddish brown. I haven't prepared the talk, but I have some notes as usual. Maxx graduated from the Creative Circus really not long ago, about 5 years ago. Had some internships here in Atlanta at Iris, BBDO, and Ogilvy. He went to New York for a short time at Mother before moving down to Austin in September of 2014, where he worked at GSD&M as a copywriter for almost 3 years, a little over 2.5 years. And he's been at Preacher since about May of 2017. We're going to say it's been 2.5 years or so. Mm-hmm. Senior copywriter, promoted recently to associate creative director, which I got to say, based on his talk today, he is well-deserved.
Thank you.
There's some wisdom coming from young Maxx. And so listeners, okay, so some of you guys listening to this podcast weren't at school today, aren't at the Creative Circus as current students, and aren't familiar with this. I always talk about, we came right out of a forum. So we have these forum speakers that come in on Friday, and you've got some pretty big names. We had Rich Silverstein recently, and he's like, it was like a community event. People came in, the theater was full, and you got to hear Rich espouse the state of advertising and his long, illustrious career, and talked about his talk at Cannes.
So did Rich have a bigger audience than I had?
Rich had a bigger audience than you. Yes, some of the people were overweight.
Okay.
And then you have a guy like Maxx who is way, way, way relatable. I think this was such a great talk because Maxx came into school today with a presentation that was conceived and executed for its audience.
That's right.
That was designed to illuminate the knowledge he's picked up in 5 years and kind of give some tips to students as they start their career. And I think the sweet spot for a speaker at a school like this is someone who's got 1 foot in the business, squarely in the business, 2, but not so far out that you don't have half a foot still in remembering what it was like to be here and figuring out what you don't know as a young student. So welcome back, man. It's really good to see you.
Thank you.
How do you think it went?
I think it went well. I didn't expect myself to be as serious as I was. I thought it was going to be slightly more lighthearted. But then all of a sudden I was in the middle of it and I was like, oh, I'm really going for it here. But I saw some heads nodding, gave me some confidence.
That's what you're looking for.
I kind of just kept going.
Yeah.
But it was good. I'm very honored to be on this podcast. I used to listen to this podcast when I was a student. I worked at a sort of a deli marketplace, and we had control over the radio when we were working there, and I would put it over the store radio.
Oh my God.
And everyone would walk in, would hear your voice, and then whoever you were talking to.
Right. Hopefully more of them. Mm-hmm. I doubt it.
And they were like, what is this podcast? And I was like, oh, it's about advertising. And they're like, cool, see you later.
Right, exactly. No one cares. The people that like it are so it's a cult following, mm-hmm. Let's put it that way. So that's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. I do have one question, and then I want to talk about some of the stuff you did. So the presentation was great because you basically boiled down the anatomy of a creative and the elements that a human being needs to sort of do this job mm-hmm. as a advertising creative and copywriter. What you didn't talk about, which I really am curious about, and it's sort of a boilerplate question for mm-hmm. somebody who's recently out of school. What was it that surprised you right out of school, what was the adjustment that you found either the most difficult or the most sort of unexpected when you started working at GSD&M right out of school?
Yeah, I mean, for GSD&M's 300 people, so just like the process, you know what I mean? Like so much of ad school is in this vacuum of creativity where you make the ad and then you show other creatives the ad and you get creative feedback on your ad and then you make that creative more creative. And you don't actually know that there's a project manager, that there's an account person, a brand manager, there's a strategist giving you a brief that goes through rounds of internal and external. It seems so stupid to say now, but like literally those fundamental things on how the business of advertising works was like, so when will, the TV spot's supposed to run in 7 months? Oh, okay. Yeah. This is different.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But was it a difficult adjustment, or was it like, oh, this is kind of cool, we've got like people looking out or whatever? Like, what was emotionally or personally, was there an adjustment for you?
Yeah, there was an adjustment. It was cool. It was like, oh wow, we have all these people that are like on our team and like will give us the strategic ammunition to make sure our idea's right and it's not all up on us. But it was a little bit of you get, again, I mean, in a place that's that big with that many layers, you sort of realize your place in things pretty fast. And they're like, hey, we have this campaign that we need a couple, kind of lucky strike extra ideas for the page 88 of this deck that you will then fly through in the last minute of a meeting and never, ever hear about them again.
Right. That's one thing I think that I've talked about this before, and I don't think that you realize when you get out that, like, you think that, like, everything you've done is monumental in school because it's a book piece and it's like the thing. You don't realize that you're hired, especially at a bigger place, to flesh out meetings. You're hired to fill holes. And it's not like a demeaning or shitty or like, oh, you're only good enough to do that, because that's needed. And you had said in your presentation that for the first 2 years you didn't really get work produced, which is 40% of your career. You have nothing to show for it, which I thought was actually really funny. But that's not exactly true for what your value was.
Right.
It's not to say that you were failing for 2 years. It's just that you were doing what the agency needed to make a flesh out a meeting, or to have work for a pitch, or to be part of a team, or to do whatever. And I think that that's an adjustment, definitely a huge one for me, because I went to an agency with 250 people in the creative department. There are 1,500 people in the agency, and just being able to understand that your role. And I will admit that I had a hard time with it, because I'm like, what do you mean this isn't? What do you mean it didn't sell? What do you mean? Did you even present it? Like, I don't even know if my work was presented half the time. I didn't realize that there's actually a value to just being there to make the things. Whether or not it sells is sort of secondary, because here it's like, it's a failure if it doesn't go in your book. It's a failure if it doesn't go to the next week. Yeah. That's not necessarily the same litmus test. And you said something I thought, I'm talking for you now, I'm sorry.
No.
You said something that I thought was I've said this 1,000 times, that like, there's just so much other stuff. You said it better than this, but there's the percentage of, I think you said a third of it is about the creativity, and 2/3 of it is really about other things. And not to kiss my guest's ass too much, but I kind of feel like one of your strengths is a level-headedness and intelligence, and an ability to put yourself in perspective, to realize, maybe because you were within class with some really great, talented people, that like success looks different than just having great work. And you're a great writer, but that's not enough, and that's not
definitely
what it's
not.
about.
And I mean, also to say that the first 2 years of not making any work was valuable, like probably more than making work. Like, I think you would be misled at what the industry is if you came out and immediately started making, the first thing you did was just bang, we're going to go into production on this. I think like that 2 years was immensely valuable for me. Like, the value for me was probably greater than if I had made work, because it allowed me to just being able to be in those meetings, to be able to be a part of the process, to see it all happen for 2 years, and really sort of go through that spin cycle sometimes of like, we're doing it again. Okay, this is another one. Like, when is this just gonna? When are we gonna break the seal of production and go into the next part? Which is something that I already have regrets to not have spoken about in that meeting, because the world of production is like a whole different thing where you are a student all over again, and you're learning lingo and what pre-pro is and casting and wardrobe and these things where it's like you didn't even know, you were like totally new to.
Yeah.
So
and it's really where a commercial can go great or can go
like
south
a good
fast.
idea can be made bad and a bad idea can be made good just by the production of it. And so that's a whole different thing that was not touched on. But just learning the business of advertising, and a lot of that just being the business of meetings, like how they go, and just being able to be in the room offers you the ability to learn.
Yeah.
And if you understand that even in those moments where the creativity is not there, the other 2/3 of the business are, and if you're learning from those moments, then you will be better in the 3rd and 4th and 5th and 15th year for having just paid attention.
Yeah, I'm leaving that there for a second. I don't even want to talk over that. That's really important. So if you're down the road enough now to have GSD&M over the horizon behind you, what's your takeaway from those years? What's the thing that you hold on to? And I know you kind of answered that a little bit because you learned the industry, but you think back of like, this is what GSD&M was for me. Yeah. This is what it meant. This is what the first job was about for me. How do you frame those years at this point?
Probably discovery. I was lucky enough to find my way into a sort of small silo of creative director, like a group that put a lot of faith in me after like my first year there. But for the first year there, I didn't have a partner, and I was in a bullpen of creatives that was just kind of getting tossed on different things. So
but that's frustrating.
It is, but it's also like you kind of speed date with not only potential partners, but also potential bosses, and you understand what makes a good one and a bad one, and then like not far, like it's amazing how quick then you become one, and you're like, oh, I don't want to be this kind of creative director. I want to be this kind of creative director. So having a little bit of that bullpen pass around experience, I think, is still just like allowed me to probably go into this part of my career knowing like, man, I hated when a creative director just said, have fun with it. Keep pushing, like give me something.
Oh my God, my partner, John, who's in Austin. I don't know if you know John Trayer in Austin. We had this running joke since forever because a teacher once said to us, do more, have more fun. And that's just like whenever anything is in slightly negative, one or the other of us will just say that because it's the most nonsense thing you've ever heard in your life.
Great start. Like, what does that mean though for the rest of it? Like, we're awesome, but where do I go now?
Right.
Yeah. So
do you think, were you always aware of, I'm picking up that you're very observant and that you're paying attention to these things and learning from them. Is this conversation we're having, is this something you think about, or is it only coming up now because we're having a conversation about it and you did a presentation? In other words, are you kind of thinking, oh, I learned this and this is what I want to do with it and this is how I want to take it with me? Are you actively managing sort of your experiences for your next experience, or are you only thinking about this conversation now that we're having it? Do you understand?
Yeah, I think that I'm more prepared for this conversation just because I just got out of the weeks of preparing to make sure that I was giving anything.
I guess I'm talking about
useful.
self-analysis. Yeah. Do you do regular sort of professional self-analysis?
I do now because the agency that I'm at makes us every 6 months. Okay, these were your goals for the last 6 months. That's what you said. Did you do them?
Right.
How? How do you think you did? What are the next goals? So they force analysis on you, but I think maybe what attracted me to writing in general, even before I knew what copywriting was, like I was like an creative writing major in college, is that like I think subconsciously maybe it's like an ADD or some other acronym of weird brain, but like I can't really help but pay attention to the things that are going on around me, and then those things I think become just part of my thought process almost accidentally.
Of course.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons I asked the question is I want to talk about the move. So were you recruited? Were you looking? And without throwing GSTM under any buses. What precipitated a move away?
It really was not it's not a slight on GSD&M as much as like you get an itch and then you're also slightly, there's a preconceived notion that if you're not like moving every 2 to 4 years, like especially early in your career, you're like not getting on that moving sidewalk of career success. But so there's a little bit of that mixed with the creative directors that were above me had a very open conversation with us that's like, guys, we're considering about going freelance, and like if you guys
that's very cool
want to stay, cool, but like we're just giving you a heads up that this might happen.
That's great.
And it caught us, my partner and I, Nick Troop, at a time where we were, you know, you go through loops of frustration and excitement as creatives, and I think we were sort of in the bottom of that loop. And we're like, man, we could make a move. And they were like, well, we are obviously going freelance. We're not hiring. But their friend, Rob Baird, they put in a good word with him, which is right down the street at Preacher.
Yeah.
It's
all about people.
Yeah, it's 100% people-based. And he admittedly kind of took a shot on us. There was no new business that needed, you know, no org chart that needed filling or anything like that. Like, he was like, yeah, I'm going to take a flyer on 2 creatives that have a blessing from people I trust, and let's bring them in and see if they can hack it. And then we got put on like 3 straight new business pitches, because a great thing about Preacher, where I am, is we don't compete for work. So like we were never going to be able to go to Jimmy and Joe's account and be like, hey, we're working on this now. Right. Or, you know, so we pitched new business for a while, which was one of the pieces of advice that I gave is, as a young creative, new business is great because it just gives you a lot of face time with the people that are calling the shots. And if you can be trusted as a reliable source of good work and good attitude, it's one of the best things you can do.
Also, isn't it the closest surrogate to what it was like in school? We kind of roll up your sleeves, you're all in one room.
Blue sky.
Right, you're coming up with big ideas. There's no sort of campaign you have to work off of. There's no limitations to the ideas you have. You're there like, and I say this in only the best way, you're there till like 2 or 3 in the morning, or you're eating donuts with the account guy at midnight, and it's like it's there's a sense of bonding that happens in new business that does not happen in day-to-day work.
Huge. My best friends that are no longer at Preacher those relationships were founded because of new business pitches, and we're still friends because we have those memories.
It's really cool. So back to what I talked at the top of the conversation, this human body. That presentation looked really cool. Who put that together?
That was Marissa Cervantes. She's a junior art director. She definitely helped me because I don't know if you noticed the dramatic shift in quality of keynote before and after.
Oh yeah, I did say earlier on the conversation that you're a great writer.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's not a muscle that I can flex.
Design?
Design. No,
the design was not you. So, all right. So so the listeners know what we're going to do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's only 7 of these. I want to go through them quick. I'm saying that for listeners to know, well, how many of these are there going to be? So there's about 7 body parts that was like this sort of anatomical sketch. And the first one you said that you need is bones. And I thought there was everybody knows about the backbone. Talk about the other bone that you were talking about that's important that you have as a creative.
Your pinky toe. Your pinky toe is like, the backbone's great to stand up for what you believe in, but if you don't have the balance to stay there when you get challenged or the agility to move when it's time to move, then it's not really all that good for anything. You'll just be a stubborn creative.
It's really great. So it's adaptability and resilience.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Of course, you have to have muscle. Right?
That's right.
This is a big one. You just said it. So talk about the muscle, because I think this is absolutely profound and super important.
Yeah. Basically, I think that the muscle part is that early on in your career, rightly so, I think you are taught to try to build and work out all of the muscles in your body. So if you're a writer, you should try to learn to code and learn Cinema 4D. And if you're a designer, try to write a headline and just try to be as well-rounded, try to be an Iron Man of creativity because if you're ever called upon for one thing or the other, it's good to know that you can at least carry your weight. But there's also going to be some times in advertising when it's just going to be an arm wrestling match. So it helps to know where your big muscles are and how to use them and how to hone them. And when someone's like, man, we really need to win this one, you're like, I got it.
Right, and be honest with it and lean on it and strengthen that one.
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately, maybe the industry is changing to want to hire young people that can do multiple things. But I've found right now in my career, I'm making money because of the one thing I'm really good at doing.
Yes.
And I can't do other stuff that's outside. You can't go it's not good to go too far out of the writing part.
Yeah.
Like if it's writing, I'm pretty flexible.
Right.
Pretty deep on that. But
Yeah.
like you start to ask me to do something and
Yeah.
and
then
graphic design.
Yeah.
No.
And even inside of writing, like you can be a great 30-second script writer, which is also really hard.
Yes, that's
30 seconds is basically like a 3-panel comic strip. And if you can't write that, then it's really hard to do that in a very succinct 3-act way where it fits in 30 seconds.
Were you here with Neil Williams at all?
No.
God, that guy's born for it.
Yeah.
He had an interactive website. His About Me had this interactive cartoon. I think it was Neil. Shit, if it wasn't Neil, I'm sorry to whoever it was that had this on their website, but I'm pretty sure it's Neil Williams. 3 panels. Mm-hmm. First frame is 2 guys are standing there. Second frame, they're still standing there, but one says something. And the third frame, the other guy's on the ground because he'd punched him. And the user of the website could submit what that person said to get punched down to the ground. And it was just a perfect, and he would pick the best ones and put them up there. Mm-hmm. And it was absolutely just it was storytelling distilled down to its pure essence. Mm-hmm. And now he works on Geico.
Yeah.
And it's just
which is basically that.
Right. So that's a talent. That's a talent itself. Okay. Yes. So know your muscle and understand it. And I think that's part of education. Like once you realize what that thing is, go to it. Go to that well.
There was somebody at the end of the podcast, an art director, that was like, what should you put in your book to show creative range? Like I was a product designer, but now I want to be an art director. Like, should I put my product design work in my book? And I was like, if you want to be a product designer, I mean, I think that there's a bit of like, it's a catch-22 where you're like, you want to show that you would be creative anyways, that you've been creative before, that they're not going to need to like squeeze creativity out of you. But at the same time, if you don't want to do that thing later, don't show them that you can do it now.
Yeah. And
it just kind of creates a little bit of a conundrum, I think.
I think it also goes to the basic definition of a book, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're who wants to be an art director, you need to have your main section of your portfolio is art direction. Mm-hmm. But if you show the side projects and your extras, someone's going to see that and say, "Wow, he's got a pretty good eye for that thing." Yeah. But I agree with you in general. All right, next you said fat.
Yeah,
you need some fat. This is another great one. This is about stamina.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the quick joke was that I've never been able to trust a super in shape creative.
Right.
Just something about your 6-pack and carved marble shoulders.
How can you do both? How can you be great at both of those things?
How can you be, when do you write headlines with one hand and curl with the other? I don't know. Like, but it's largely about stamina. Like, I think that a lot of the times, if a business problem is getting to a creative agency's desk, it's because it's really hard to solve. And even when you add on the creative requirements inside of that agency to just, the bar of taste level and of what we expect out of creatives, like that problem can get even exacerbated how hard that problem is going to be to solve. And yeah, sometimes you could crack it really fast, but more often than not, you just have to be willing to like hibernate on that thing until the solution sort of thaws out and presents itself.
It's great. All right, guts and heart.
Yeah.
And I loved how you put this too. So I want to see if you remember exactly how you were talking about it. Everyone's made of soft stuff. So what does this mean? Guts and heart.
Yeah. Like I think that a lot of the culture of creativity is about hardness in a lot of ways, is like being resilient and persistent and having, a hard outer shell to let criticism flow off your back and all that stuff. But like, the minute that you realize that like it's the soft stuff on the inside that makes any of this worth it, that like otherwise there's no point, like that the client across from the table that is, could be easily perceived as your arch enemy is actually the answer, is the person with the guts and the heart.
The person.
Yeah. Like, we're all people. Like, in the business of advertising, in any business, is just a bunch of people in different rooms with different problems, having different meetings. And so when I say guts and heart, it's really just like, know the tenderness inside the people, even when they're being their most stern, and
possibly especially.
Yeah. And definitely especially when you feel like they're just cold, ruthless anagrams, C-level anagrams. Like, no, that person is a person with guts and heart. And the minute that you start seeing them that way is the minute that you can sort of change how they feel.
Yeah, it's Jungian psychology too. Behavior is a manifestation of an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of hard outer is representing something more than it looks on the face.
Mm-hmm.
Psychotherapy in a group is really powerful. You can understand how to read people.
Yeah,
and it's really powerful. All right, so that's a great one. Skin, you got to have skin. Oh, this skin part was awesome.
Yeah. I just am like,
I want to read your quote. Can I read your quote?
Yeah.
So I wrote down verbatim what your slide said. Be thick-skinned enough to not take criticism personally, but make sure it's thin enough to feel goosebumps now and then.
Mm-hmm. I think the thick skin thing gets glorified. Like, you should go like full rhino and like not let anything like pierce you, and like you should be just like this impenetrable fortress of creativity. But like, then you actually lose all ability to feel, which is like the whole essence of being creative, and empathy. Like, right. You need to have both sides, because the minute that like creativity is inherently a culture of death, you have 100 ideas, 95% of them get killed if you're Dan Wyden or the like. Like, if you let your body work towards that percentage, then undoubtedly you just won't allow yourself to feel in moments that you really, 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 really should. Yeah. You really need to.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, the next one is brains.
Brains, yeah.
You have to have brains. What does that mean?
I meant it in the just sort of a reminder that we're in a solutions business. I already said that a bit, and it's like, you kind of feel like you are a Deloitte consultant when you say that, but like, I think it's just important to remind, especially a group of people who have the opportunity to come into a place like the Creative Circus every day with a name like the Creative Circus, to think that this is all just art for art's sake sometimes. Mm-hmm. But you need to know that, like, you're not an artist. At best, you're a commercial artist, but really you're a creative business solver, And knowing that the most creative one doesn't always win, and the best one doesn't always win, and the first one doesn't always win. Like, knowing that, and also having the brain, the curious brain, to want to figure out how things get sold, why things get sold, why they didn't get sold. It's just like, it just goes with the curiosity that I think keeps you going in times when you feel like creativity is failing you.
Exactly. All right, eyes and ears.
Yeah.
Gotta have eyes and ears.
Eyes and ears. Just pay attention. This one, like, I could get super fired up about a bit.
This has a lot of tendrils to it.
Yeah, and it goes back to maybe the first thing about, how fruitful a, theoretical 2 fruitless years of your career could be. But like, just pay attention. Just pay attention. It is amazing how often people will give you the answer to their problem and they don't even know they're doing it, just because you're willing to pay attention to the things they're saying.
It's great.
And I think that part of that is always sort of, it's like observe and report. Like, be there when people are talking. Don't just wait. Don't just be like, okay, then this is what I'm going to say afterwards. Allow them to lead you to the answer before thinking you have it, is kind of it.
I would say always keep a piece of paper with you too, because like, you should hold on to that thought, but see where the conversation's going. And when I have these conversations, it's as a learned thing. I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm still screwing up where I still have to write down what I want to say so that I don't lose what you just said. But I also think that, like, you and I were talking before we started about stand-up comedy, and comedy and art is most of the time it's seeing things that we all see or walk by or don't observe, think about, play with, grab it, and mess around with it. And I think that being an observant person, of course, you're talking about something super practical and super valuable about paying attention and listening in meetings and in looking at political, who's got the power in the situation, what are my boss's fears and concerns, what are the client's fears and concerns, but also just as fundamental as something you see in the world, and playing with that as an insight and fuel for your, filling your well with input. Yeah. So that's 100%. Eyes and ears to me. I look at that. It's both. And then finally, you said that, and this is a very preacher thing, to have soul. Yeah, soul brought to you by Preacher. No, but soul was really just like all the things in between my skin and your skin, and the people, everything between the people that you work with. Like, I think the way I said it in the meeting or in the forum is like, you'll never have enough of any of these alone. Like, right. That's great. It will always take more than you to do what you think you can do. Surround yourself with people that you're willing to give your bones and muscle and fat and skin and guts and heart to, and knowing that they will give it back to you in turn. This was one thing that, like, I will raise my hand and say, like, one of my biggest mistakes at the Creative Circus, and probably continue to be, is that, like, I did not value my relationships with the people that I was surrounding myself with enough to know that those are the people that were giving me strength, and that they will continue to be, whether I like it or not, be the people that will choose to give me strength or choose not to, based on job recommendations, based on just the industry's not that big, So, like, knowing that soul is largely just, maybe it could be kindness, maybe it's just empathy and passion, but it's vulnerability. Yeah. Is that in there for you? Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think that part of it is the guts and the heart, but it's definitely the soul to be like, I cannot do this on my own. And I think my worst creative tendency is that when problems get really tough, I try to go like full LeBron, and I'm like, I'm just going to take it on. Yeah, I'm just going to hunker down and solve this. And I think one thing that it might work in basketball, it doesn't work in advertising or soccer. No, and especially as I've gotten into this new role in my career where I'm not doing the work all the time. Like, you can't go full LeBron and also be the guy that's not, like, just overseeing the work. Right. Like, like, I'm no, that's a horrible boss. Yeah, a terrible boss. Like, I had to ask a creative director, multiple creative directors recently, like, what do I do with the stress when I go home and it's not me that's supposed to be writing the headlines, and it's not me that's supposed to be solving the problem. That's great. And I can't just go into my office and just write it until it's solved. Like, what do I do with that? Because do I just hope that work's being done and I'll come in tomorrow and that stress will be, taken away from me? And I'm still struggling with it, to be honest. That's an amazing question. Was there an answer? There was. I mean, it's like a lot of it is just the trust of, you have to trust the people underneath you. You have to trust the process a bit, not to do another basketball reference. It's kind of a deep cut, but it's a little bit of like, you have to trust that the way that the work is going to happen, and that when it gets brought to you, you can help it along in the way that you're supposed to, without being the dominating boss that is doing the work that you're not supposed to do. Yeah, and realize it might look very different than it would have looked if you'd done it. Very different than you might have in your mind. Exactly. That's actually pretty exciting once you can get behind that and hire the right people. Right. All right, so I have a final question for you that I've been asking a lot of guests on the show. What someone kind of asked the question, I think Lauren Byers asked the question for him. What trait of yours, I ask it this way, what personal trait of yours do you think has served you best so far? What is it about you that I think has helped you get to where you are right now?
honestly, probably just my presentation skills. Like my ability to feel comfortable in a room full of people who are going to be making decisions and who,
valuable.
and are more valuable in my company and not. And I think a lot of that was, honed in new business. I think part of it is just, I think I'm comfortable in the way that I speak, and like the way that I can defend ideas without feeling like I'm attacking or defending as much as conversating.
Well, you're very good because I've seen this now 3 times with you today, where you have internalized the expression of an idea to the point where you're not defending the work because you're so connected to the idea of the work. So what I mean by that is that you said almost exactly what I had in your notes. You did the presentation twice, and you're not looking at any notes now. This is in you, the script that you had memorized. So the work becomes so kind of second nature to you that you can discuss it in a way without it being about this third entity, me, you, and the work in between us. It's sort of like, well, I have the work, let's discuss the work. It's inside me.
Yeah.
And that has to start from the very beginning of the first time you sit at a keyboard.
Yeah.
Just kind of start exploring your own ideas. So there's some, and I will agree with you that I think there is incredible value to a creative's ability to present their work.
Yeah.
It's huge. It will get you promoted.
And I think the second thing that I'm always working on, and I don't think I'm inherently good at it, is empathy. Just being able to think outside yourself, and especially in the moments when your emotions are running their highest.
Yeah.
Because in those times where a thing gets killed after 3 weeks of work, and it gets killed in post-production and whatever, like in the times when advertising is at its hardest and you just want to just throw your hands up in the air and run out of the building screaming, I think it does wonders to have just the wherewithal to say, okay, but from their perspective, why did they do that? And to be able to like Rob talks about just shortening the walk. Like you're in Rob is constantly in meetings, and if he's in a meeting, it's because the problem has gotten so bad. Like once you're at the top, all you do is solve problems.
Triage.
Yeah. And he's like, and there are a lot of times where earlier in my career and now will have to feel like I have to get up out of the chair and take a short walk and then come back in the chair. And by the time that I sit back down, it's over. But just shorten the walk. Just shorten the walk up until the point where you just don't have to get up anymore, because you have, not out of a lack of caring, never out of a lack of caring, but out of actually the ability to care about perspectives that aren't yours, to then have that sort of balance it out to the place where you're not going tilt on something that you don't need to.
Yeah. I think if someone were listening to this and were to back up 90 seconds to 2 minutes and listen to this, and instead of the word advertising, you just talked about personal relationships.
Yeah.
There may be a moment in a personal relationship where someone says something that upsets you so much you can't see their side. You want to throw your hands up in the air and leave the building.
Yeah.
And empathy is the most powerful skill you can develop. And something that is active has to be conscious. It's not something that's just going to happen.
Right.
You're not just going to get better like writing. You have to actually practice it. Well, both of them, I guess you have to.
Because if I would just say, advertising is personal relationships.
Absolutely. Oh, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
There's not a whole lot difference besides the fact that you don't have to write a script for one.
Right. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you. This has been a dream of mine.
I think it went well. I hope the listeners agree. Let Max know what you thought. You can email him at Maxx. That's 2 X's in Maxx. Maxx at preacher.co. Reach me as always at danspodcast@mac.com. There will be links and pictures and all sorts of newsworthy items on the Facebook page at facebook.com/DGMS podcast. I'll be back in a little while with another conversation. And in the meantime, thank you for listening. Max, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Listeners, we'll see you. Bye-bye. That's all it is.
That's it, huh?